It began with a knock I hadn't been expecting. I just finished a late shift and was halfway through reheating leftovers when I opened the door to see Natalie and Jack standing there, both dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Natalie wore a floral dress I recognized from a boutique I'd only ever walked past, and Jack's watch caught the light in a way that felt intentional. "Surprise," Natalie said, lifting 2 large bags from an upscale Italian place I'd only splurged on once. "We thought we'd bring dinner to my favorite sister." I let them in, though something in me tensed. Jack moved past me without hesitation, scanning my small condo like it was part of an open house tour. "Cozy," he said, his tone carrying a weight I couldn't quite place. Over dinner they talked about trips they'd taken, people they'd met, names dropped like currency. I listened, nodding when appropriate, waiting for whatever had really brought them here. It came over dessert, slipped in between polite smiles and casual remarks. "So, we have some exciting news," Natalie began, glancing at Jack as if to hand him the floor. "We found our dream home," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Lakewood Heights." The name alone carried a certain weight, one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods. I set down my fork. "That's impressive. Congratulations." Jack smiled, but there was something calculating in it. "Here's the thing. With the market the way it is, lenders want a little extra security. Just a formality, really. We need a guarantor. Just your signature. You wouldn't have to pay a cent." My eyes moved from him to Natalie. She reached for my hand. "It's not a big deal, Audrey. You know we'd never ask if it was risky." Kept my voice steady. "How much is the mortgage?" $850, Jack answered smoothly. "But my commission structure is changing next quarter. We'll be more than covered." My stomach tightened. "That's a lot. What's your annual income right now?" Natalie shifted in her seat. Jack's smile didn't falter, but it lost some warmth. "Our income isn't the issue. The bank just wants reassurance. It's paperwork." I took a slow breath. "I'll need to think about it. And I want to understand exactly what being a guarantor means." For a moment, Jack's expression darkened before he recovered. "Of course. Just don't take too long. We need to lock in the rate by Friday." When they left, the smell of their cologne and expensive food lingered in the air, almost mocking the quiet of my living room. I sat there long after the door shut, the weight of the request pressing on me. The next morning I called Martin, the financial advisor I'd worked with when I bought my condo. After listening, he didn't hesitate. "Absolutely not, Audrey. If they default, you'd be on the hook for the entire mortgage. It could ruin your credit, your savings, even cost you your home." "But they're family," I said weakly, though I already knew his answer. "Family or not, this is financial suicide. Especially given what you've told me about their work history. Don't do it." The rest of the week was a slow tightening of pressure. Texts from Natalie. "We're counting on you." Jack's messages were more clipped. "Don't let this opportunity slip away for us." By Thursday night, their tone had shifted entirely. "I thought you had our back," Natalie wrote. Jack followed with, "People remember who turned away when they needed help." I went into Friday knowing my answer. At our parents' house for dinner, I pulled Natalie aside in the kitchen. "I can't do it. The risk is too high. If something happened." "Nothing will happen," she snapped, cutting me off. "Jack's career is about to take off. This house is our future. If that's true, the bank should approve you without me." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned on her heel without another word. The following morning I called Jack directly. "I've made my decision. I can't be your guarantor. I hope you understand this is a financial choice, not personal." There was a pause, then his voice low and even. "Family supports each other, Audrey. You're making a big mistake. I'm protecting what I've worked for." His tone sharpened. "Natalie was right about you. Always thinking you're better than everyone else." He hung up before I could respond. I sat with the silence afterward, the sound of my own breathing loud in the room. Part of me hoped the refusal would end it, that they'd be angry, but it would pass. I didn't yet understand that this was the moment things began to crack beyond repair. Looking back, I can still see the exact fork in the road where I stood. On one side, the familiar role of fixer and rescuer I'd played all my life. On the other, the unsteady ground of boundaries, the choice to say no, knowing it might cost me more than I could imagine. Chose the boundary. And in doing so, I learned that sometimes the real fracture doesn't happen in the moment of conflict, but in the quiet after, when you realize the version of you they loved only existed because you never told them no. That night, I lay awake with the weight of my decision pressing against my chest. I didn't know then that my refusal wasn't the end. It was the first drop of water before the flood. I thought the refusal might create some distance, that after a few tense days, things would settle. Instead, the space between us filled with noise. The first messages were polite check-ins. Just wondering if you've had a change of heart. We're about to lose the house. They arrived at odd hours, but I still read them, still felt the pull to explain myself again. By midweek, the tone had shifted. We would have done it for you. Don't forget who stood by you when no one else did. It was the way they both spoke in absolutes that unsettled me. No room for disagreement, no acknowledgement that my life and my resources were mine to protect. Jack's texts were shorter, sharper. Opportunities like this don't come twice. Don't be the reason your sister misses hers. I stopped replying after Thursday. That silence was its own decision, one that felt heavier than I expected. On Friday afternoon, I was midway through charting a patient's vitals when a colleague tapped my shoulder. "There's a man at the front desk asking for you. Says he's your brother-in-law." My stomach tightened. I found Jack standing near the nurse's station, looking wildly out of place in a suit. His expression calm but his presence loud. "This is my workplace," I said quietly, leading him toward the waiting area. "You can't just show up here." "You've been ignoring our calls," he said, voice low but edged. "We need an answer about the house. The sellers." "I already gave you my answer. It's no." Something in his jaw shifted. "You think you're better than us because you've got your little condo and your stable job. You have no idea what your sister deserves." Before I could respond, a security guard approached. His presence enough to make Jack step back. He left without another word, but not before giving me a look that stayed with me for the rest of my shift. That night, as I walked toward my car in the dimly lit hospital lot, I noticed a familiar silver BMW idling 2 rows away. The driver's seat was reclined, but I could still make out Jack's profile. He didn't get out. I didn't approach. I drove home by a longer route, checking my mirror every few blocks. The next morning I started saving everything. Texts, call logs, even scribbled notes of in-person encounters. Elaine, my oldest friend, was the one who told me to. When I showed her the messages, she read them with a steady face. "This is more than persistence," she said. "It's pressure. And it's crossing into intimidation." "They're still family," I said, though the words felt less certain every time I used them. Elaine shook her head. "Family doesn't back you into a corner like this." On Sunday, I went to my parents' house for the usual family dinner. Natalie and Jack arrived late, sweeping into the room as if they owned it. Jack dominated the conversation, weaving vague stories about investment opportunities, glancing at me every so often as if to remind me of my place in his narrative. When my father asked directly about their income, Jack sidestepped with a laugh. "Let's not bore everyone with numbers." After dessert, Natalie found me alone in the kitchen. "We need to lock in by tomorrow. I'm asking you one last time." Kept my voice steady. "I can't do it, Nat. If something goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong," she snapped. "This is our future. Why can't you just support us?" I didn't answer right away. Her eyes narrowed. "You've changed," she said finally before walking away. That night, another text from Jack arrived. "People remember who turns their back when it matters." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. Not because it didn't bother me, but because I already knew. He was right about one thing. People do remember. And I was beginning to realize that memory could be a kind of weapon. What I didn't know yet was how far he was willing to take it. The knock came just after 9. It wasn't the soft, uncertain kind. It was deliberate, forceful. I froze halfway between the kitchen and the living room, my phone still in my hand. The last text I'd received from Natalie had been hours earlier. "Jack is upset. We lost the house because of the financing." I'd read it twice before replying with a simple, "I'm sorry to hear that." I thought that would be the end of it. Through the peephole I saw Jack standing there. Shoulders tense, jaw set. He knocked again, harder this time. "Open the door, Audrey. I know you're in there." I considered calling the police right then, but part of me thought I could defuse it, reason with him one last time. I unlatched the chain but kept the door only slightly open. "We can talk," I said, "but you need to calm down. My neighbors." The rest of the sentence never made it out. Jack shoved his shoulder into the door, sending it flying open. I stumbled backward, hitting the floor hard. My phone skidded out of reach. Before I could stand, he was on me, his hand gripping my arm with enough force to bruise. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" His breath was hot, his voice louder now. "Little Miss Perfect with her nursing degree and her savings account." "Jack, you need to leave," I said, keeping my voice as even as I could. "Right now." He tightened his grip. "You cost us our future. That house was everything. And you just, what? Decided you couldn't be bothered." I tried to twist away, but his fingers dug deeper into my arm. "It was too much money," I said, the words spilling out fast. "It was a risk I couldn't take." His face twisted. "Too much money," he repeated, almost mocking. Then, without warning, he slammed me against the wall. My head hit with a sharp crack, and the room spun. Before I could regain my footing, he yanked my hair and drove my face into the wall. Pain exploded across my nose, warm blood rushing over my lips and down my chin. Gasp, tasting metal. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice breaking, but he didn't stop. He twisted my arm behind my back, wrenching it upward until I heard, and felt, the pop of my shoulder dislocating. The pain was so sharp it stole my breath. Through the blur of tears and blood, I saw movement in the doorway. Natalie. She stood there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Nat, help me," I choked out. She didn't move. "You should have signed the mortgage, Audrey." The words landed harder than Jack's blows. Jack finally released my arm, letting me collapse onto the floor. I clutched it against my body, trying not to black out. He started sweeping his arm across my bookshelf, sending everything crashing to the ground. "This is what happens when you betray family," he said, smashing a framed photo against the kitchen counter. I tried to crawl toward the door, but a sharp kick to my ribs stopped me cold. I couldn't breathe for several seconds, my vision narrowing to a tunnel. Natalie's voice came again, flat. "We should go. The neighbors probably heard." Jack stood over me, breathing hard. He didn't look regretful. He looked satisfied. "Remember this next time you think about saying no." They left together. Natalie stepped around the blood on the floor without looking back. The door stayed open, letting in the night air. For a long moment I just lay there, trying to pull air into my lungs. My face throbbed, my shoulder screamed, and every movement sent fire through my ribs. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I had to move. My parents' house was 2 blocks away. If I could get there, I'd be safe. Getting to my feet was agony. My right arm hung uselessly, my shirt sticking to me where the blood had soaked through. I made it to the hallway, leaning on the wall to stay upright. The elevator ride felt endless. The night air hit me like ice. 2 blocks had never seemed so far. I kept my eyes on the ground, my pace unsteady but relentless. Each breath was a battle, each step another small victory. By the time I turned onto my parents' street, my vision was swimming. The porch light was on, a small, steady beacon. I made it to the walkway before my knees gave out. I crawled the last few feet, my palm leaving smears of red on the concrete. I pressed the doorbell with what little strength I had left. The door opened, and my mother's scream cut through the night. The next moments came in flashes. My father's voice, urgent and shaking. Hands lifting me, wrapping me in a blanket. Sirens growing louder. The paramedics' questions felt far away. The bright light of the ambulance was almost unbearable. My father gripped my hand the whole time, repeating, "You're safe now. You're safe." In the emergency room, the doctor spoke in terms I knew from my own work: nasal fracture, shoulder dislocation, possible rib fractures. I heard the words, but they didn't feel like they belonged to me. When the police arrived, a woman in plain clothes introduced herself as Detective Thompson. She had the kind of steady gaze that made it clear she'd seen worse but never stopped caring. "Take your time," she said, opening a small notebook. I told her everything. Knock. A door. A blows. Natalie's words. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before saying, "Your sister witnessed the entire assault?" "Yes." My voice was almost a whisper. "And she told you?" "She told me I should have signed the mortgage." For the first time, the detective's face shifted, just slightly, but enough to see the disbelief. She closed the notebook gently. "We'll take it from here." I nodded, but inside I knew something had shifted forever. My sister's silence during the assault had been a choice. And so would mine from this point forward. I wouldn't stay silent. Not anymore. By the time the sun rose, the hospital room was still and cold. My arm was in a sling, my ribs wrapped, my face swollen enough that my own reflection felt like a stranger's. I had been in that room countless times as a nurse, moving quickly from patient to patient, offering calm in the middle of chaos. Now I was the one lying still, the beeping of the monitors counting out the seconds between each decision I didn't yet know I had to make. Detective Thompson came back mid-morning. She didn't rush, didn't press, just stood by the side of the bed. "We're looking for him," she said. "We'll likely have him in custody soon. But we'll need your statement on record." "Officially." He nodded. My voice felt smaller than it had ever been. "I want to press charges." She gave one small nod in return. "That's the right call." When my parents came in, my father's eyes were red but steady. "They're not answering their phones," he said, meaning Natalie and Jack. My mother sat quietly by the bed, her hand over mine, as if she could will strength back into me. The paperwork started that afternoon. Photographs of my injuries, medical reports attached to police files. I'd filled out countless incident forms in my career, but signing my name at the bottom of an assault report with my own injuries described in black and white was different. It was a line I couldn't uncross. Elaine came after her shift, leaning in the doorway before speaking. "You know he's going to push back, right? He'll try to make you feel like you're ruining their lives." "I'm not ruining anything," I said quietly. "He already did that." That night, I lay awake replaying Natalie's face in the doorway, the stillness in her body, the cold in her voice. I had always believed that if I were in danger, she would be the one to pull me out. That belief was gone now, and its absence was heavier than the sling on my shoulder. By the third day, the doctors cleared me to leave. My parents insisted I come home with them, at least until I could move without pain stabbing through every breath. My father installed a deadbolt on my condo door the same afternoon. "Just until you decide your next step," he said, but we both knew he meant more than just the lock. The calls from unknown numbers started almost immediately. I didn't answer, but each one left a silence on the voicemail long enough to make my skin prickle. The messages Natalie sent were clipped. "We should talk. This has gone too far." None of them included an apology. Detective Thompson called 2 days later. "We've arrested him," she said. "There will be a hearing. You'll need to be there." I sat with that for a moment, the reality of it sinking in. Will Natalie have to testify? If she's willing. But in cases like this, willingness isn't always there. I didn't say what I was thinking. That willingness wasn't the problem. It was loyalty. The wrong kind. In the quiet hours that followed, I thought about my patients. The ones who had come in after assaults, some with partners sitting beside them, others alone. I'd always told them they were doing the right thing by speaking up. Now I realized how heavy that choice felt when it was your own. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed slowly, choosing a plain blouse that wouldn't draw attention. My father drove me downtown. Neither of us spoke much, but his hand on the steering wheel tightened when we pulled up to the courthouse. Inside, I saw Jack for the first time since that night. He was in a suit, his hair neat, his expression calm in a way that made my stomach turn. Natalie sat behind him. She looked smaller somehow, but her eyes didn't meet mine. When my name was called, I walked to the stand. My voice didn't shake. I told the truth. Every detail. Every word she had said. Afterward, Detective Thompson caught my eye and gave the faintest nod, as if to say, "You did what you needed to do." That night, back in my parents' guest room, I lay in the dark and felt something I hadn't since the door had flown open. Control. Fragile, new, but there. Pressing charges hadn't erased what happened. It hadn't healed the betrayal. But it was the first step in taking back the ground I'd lost. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, the temperature was fine, but in the way people's eyes passed over you like you were just another case on the docket. I sat at the prosecution's table, my arm still in a sling, the bruising along my ribs hidden under a loose sweater. I told myself this was just another step, another box to check. But when the bailiff called Jack's name, the sound settled in my chest like a weight. He walked in wearing the same suit from the hearing, polished shoes clicking softly against the floor. His attorney trailed beside him, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. Behind them, Natalie entered. She scanned the room, her gaze skimming over me like I wasn't there. The judge opened the proceedings, the formality of the language making the violence I'd endured sound like something pulled from a file rather than lived in my body. Medical records were submitted. Photographs were projected briefly onto a screen before being passed to the jury. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand and sat down, my palms flat against my thighs. The prosecutor's questions came in steady, measured tones. I answered them the same way. The night of the knock. The door forced open. The blows. Natalie in the doorway. "And what did your sister say to you during the assault?" She said, "You should have signed the mortgage." "And what did you understand that to mean?" "That she believed I deserved what was happening because I refused to be their guarantor." The prosecutor nodded, letting the words hang in the air. Across the room, Jack's attorney shifted in his seat. When cross-examination came, the defense tried to paint me as controlling. "Is it not true that you've always been the responsible sister?" the lawyer asked. "I've worked hard for what I have," I said, keeping my voice even. "That doesn't make me responsible for financing my sister's lifestyle." When I stepped down, my heart was steady. I'd told the truth, and it was on record now. Natalie was called next. I'd expected her to take the stand for the defense, to soften what had happened or claim it wasn't as bad as I described. She walked past me without a glance, her heels quiet on the wood floor. Her testimony started predictably, confirming she was present, that she saw Jack and me talking before things got heated. The defense attorney's tone was almost gentle. "Would you say my client intended to cause serious harm?" Natalie hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward me, just for a second. "He was out of control," she said finally. The room shifted. She continued, her voice tightening. "He smashed her face into the wall. Her shoulder. I heard it when it dislocated. I've never heard my sister scream like that." The prosecutor stepped in. "And what did you do while this was happening?" Natalie's breath caught. "Nothing. I stood there. And then I told her she should have signed the mortgage papers." Her voice broke. "Who does that? What kind of person watches her sister being hurt and blames her for it?" The defense attorney tried to redirect, but the damage was done. Natalie's admission had landed, and I could see the jury watching her with a different kind of scrutiny now. When court adjourned for the day, I stepped outside into the thin winter light. My parents were waiting by the doors, but before I could reach them, Natalie approached. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, her voice low. I couldn't lie anymore." I studied her face, searching for the sister I used to know. That's not the same as making it right, I said quietly. I know. She glanced toward the street. But maybe it's a start. She walked away before I could answer. I watched her go, unsure if what I'd heard in her voice was guilt, grief, or just another layer of self-preservation. That night, I replayed her testimony in my head. The details didn't change anything about the pain I'd endured, but it had punctured the defense Jack had been building. It was the first time since the assault that I felt the balance tilt, even slightly in my favor. The verdict came faster than I expected. Less than 2 hours after closing arguments, the jury filed back in. I didn't look at them as the foreperson read the decision. Guilty on all counts. My focus stayed fixed on the edge of the table in front of me, tracing the grain of the wood as if memorizing it could keep me steady. Jack didn't react at first. Then, when the judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison, followed by 3 years probation and a permanent restraining order, I saw the mask crack. The tight control he'd worn for weeks slipped, and for a brief moment, the rage that had been there the night of the assault showed itself in full. Natalie sat in the second row. She didn't look at me, not even when the deputies led him away in handcuffs. Outside the courthouse, the cold hit my lungs like glass. My parents walked on either side of me, their presence a quiet barrier against the reporters clustered near the steps. We didn't stop to speak to anyone. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been said in court. 2 days later, an envelope arrived at my parents' house. Inside was a short letter from Natalie. I filed for divorce. I'm getting help. The handwriting was shaky, but the words were clear. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't try to explain. Just a simple acknowledgement of where she stood. I moved back into my condo the following week. My father had reinforced the locks, and I'd installed a security system with cameras. The first night I slept there alone, the quiet felt different. Not empty but protective. I didn't dream about the knock at the door. Recovery was slow. The bruises faded first, the swelling in my face easing until strangers wouldn't know what had happened. My shoulder took longer. Physical therapy was a mix of frustration and small triumphs. The first time I could reach a shelf again without pain. The first time I lifted a grocery bag without fear it would give out. The ribs healed last. A dull ache on cold mornings reminding me they'd been broken. The emotional recovery had no such milestones. Some days I felt lighter, as if the weight of that night had been set down somewhere I didn't need to carry it. Other days a sound, a sudden knock, a raised voice outside, would pull me straight back into the fear. My therapist called it normal, called it exhausting. 3 months after the trial, I stood in front of a small group at a community center, telling my story for the first time outside a courtroom. Survivors Rising had invited me to speak at one of their outreach events. I kept my voice steady, sticking to the facts, but I didn't leave out the part about Natalie. I wanted people to understand that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers, and that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, no matter what someone tries to make you believe. Afterward, a woman in the audience came up to me. "I haven't told anyone yet," she said quietly. "But hearing you, I think I can." I nodded because I knew exactly how much that cost her. By the 1-year mark, I'd settled into a new rhythm. My work in community health felt meaningful in a way the ER never had. I still visited my parents most Sundays. Natalie started joining occasionally, the conversations careful, circling around neutral ground. Trust didn't return, but a kind of civility did. Maybe that was all we'd ever have again. One rainy evening, another envelope arrived. This one from Jack, forwarded through his attorney. The handwriting was neater than I remembered. "I accept full responsibility for my actions. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am working to make sure I never harm anyone again." I read it once and set it aside. Whether he meant it or not didn't matter. My healing wasn't tied to his remorse. What mattered was this: I had drawn a line and kept it, even when it cost me family, comfort, and the illusion of safety. That line had held. And because of it, I could walk into my home each night without wondering if the next knock on the door would be the one that broke me. Some scars are visible. My shoulder still aches before a storm. Others are quieter. A wariness around certain smiles, a reflexive glance at a door before I open it. They don't define me, but they remind me. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Saying no is not the same as turning your back on someone. Sometimes it's the only way to protect yourself. And no matter who's asking, no matter what they promise, your safety is worth more than their approval. Always. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your country below.